Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat episode 274, featuring the fourth and final installment of my interview with Miss Susan Manley of Olde Skuul. In this last part of the interview, we talk about the Imagination Network, a very early online gaming platform, pre-internet stuff. It's really interesting, and Susan knows a lot of the technical stuff behind all that, which is really fascinating. We also talk about a game called Mattel's Barbie Super Sports game. It's probably not a game you've played before, but some pretty interesting stuff about that too. A lot of cool behind-the-scenes stuff. And then we wrap up with a platform, a technology, I guess, that Susan helped develop called the Espresso Fitness System. This is a interactive exercise system supposed to make exercise fun. Anyway, a lot of great stuff here. So without further ado, here is Miss Susan Manley. All right, so just a few last questions.
Okay.
Most of which are about the Imagination Network.
Okay.
Yeah, this is something I'd like to know a lot more about.
Okay.
So maybe just start off, what was it? And then what happened to it?
The Imagination Network. This is really cool because it started long before I ever got there. And it started, apparently, Ken Williams, who was the founder of Sierra Online, wanted a way for him and his mom to be able to play bridge. So playing computer games online across the country together. Okay. So they created this system to do it, and then they started creating like a place where you could play several different types of games, and you went to different areas to play the different types of games. And it ended up being card and board games, and eventually they had action products. They had a flight simulator called Red Baron. They had each one of the lands was themed, and it was supposed to draw different demographics of people. Anyhow, I got there just after the whole company had been sold to AT&T, and AT&T thought that it was going to be part of their retention strategy to keep consumers using AT&T. And then they decided that they weren't going to do that. So I arrived right after the deal had been inked, and the deal that they had purchased Imagination Network for had included so much prepaid development time from Sierra Online to develop some more games to release. Well, at the time, there were a lot of different online gaming systems. There were places like Kesmai and a couple of others. And the games, there's a couple different types of online games. And the games that Sierra were making were more like the LAN type games to be played on a local network, not on an internet. And so they didn't have they were not used to dealing with as much latency as we would deal with. They were not used to dealing with the number of players that we would want to put into a product. And so we had these great big epic games that we wanted to put on the system, but we had to be able to spawn many instances of them and support them all and allow people to meet up and actually find each other to play against each other, and the list goes on.
This was pre-internet, or?
Actually, this is pre-internet. Imagination Network was a dial-up service when I got there. We re-architected the system and created an entirely new platform on Win95 to release, and at the time too, we also got bought by AOL. We were planning to be internet Win95 service prior to that, and then all of a sudden we were Win95 service underneath AOL, and dealing with an entirely different design principle once again. And not just latency issues then, but like extreme latency issues, because AOL people were almost all on dial-up at the time, because that was how people got their internet service when they didn't have DSL, which you needed to be close into a service to have DSL. You couldn't be out in the the urban regions. As a matter of fact, I know that for a fact because I had to get long distance DSL where I lived, and that didn't come along for a while because I happened to live on a hillside. And even though I was where all of the quote unquote wealthy people were, they were not installing cable access up there for the longest time. So anyhow, the AOL players wanted downloadable games, and AOL also wanted downloadable games. So all of these great big games that we had in production for Imagination Network were all CD distribution, graphically intensive, things like Mission Force Cyberstorm. We had Trophy Bass.
Did you do any work on the Neverwinter Nights?
No, I did not work on Neverwinter Nights. I'm well aware of it, but I never actually did any work on it. Cool stuff, though.
Mm-hmm. So notice when you say AOL bought it out, you didn't exactly seem cheerful on that point.
Well, it was hard. It was hard because everything that we had been building towards to create this service where you could connect up and play long distance, kind of like an early version of a Steam, but you know, you'd have to distribute DVDs to people. Instead, ended up being downloadable assets, and so most of the products that I was working on were, you know, null and void, and it was hard. And to try and put an action product through AOL's service, at the time the architecture was that all packets between players got sent to AOL in the East Coast and then came back. The latency issues were doubled, you know. They didn't allow for UDP, only TCP/IP.
So you think that's probably where they went wrong with it?
Well, there are security issues. There was a lot of discussion with our engineers about creating a new flavor of UDP that was a blend of TCP/IP. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about, by the way?
I've seen these letters arranged in that sequence before. Yeah.
Sadly, as a producer, I get to know a lot more about all of the magic things that make games work.
It's like when you have to open up ports on your router and it's, you know, UDP or whatever.
TCP/IP is a packet protocol that allows the computer to send a message and then send another message that says, "Did you get that?" When the other machine responds back with what's called an ACK, then it can send the next message.
An ACK?
Yeah. ACK. So you've heard the term ACK probably. An ACK
now I have.
it's a confirmation. Anyhow, TCP/IP literally requires an ACK for every piece of information that it sends. And it sends them in these little concise bytes, which means that it's really slow because it has to do twice the trip in order to put the next piece of information out. UDP says, I'm just going to blast you with this whole bunch of stuff. Here's a packet, 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 here's a packet. Oh, did you get all that? Yes. Here's some more. So it doesn't have twice the trip for each piece of information. And that was the big difference. It was a speed issue as far as the round trips. And because literally when you're connecting up all of these people that live all the way across the country and everything had to go get funneled from AOL and then back out again, that was where the problems were. This is where distributed clouds support came into being, because you needed to put game servers on both the East Coast and the West Coast and in the middle of the country, and so that it could route the packets appropriately.
Yeah, I remember back when AOL was sending out those little canisters. I think I probably still have a couple boxes full of those things.
We used to make coasters out of all of our dead DVDs and our dead CDs. Actually, John Manley and we were really funny. Electronic Arts would have a dead bin for all of the products that were bad. So we would pick up all of the deluxe paint ones and make them into coasters on our table at home. And of course, it was a $500 paint package, so people would freak out because we were putting our coffee on our discs. And we'd be like, no, really, they're dead discs. And they're like, they just, it couldn't compute, you know. And now we realize that that was a 5-cent piece of plastic. But we used to do that with the DVDs too. Make them into coasters. It really tweaks people's brains.
So I guess just to wrap up here, I noticed you also worked on a Mattel Barbie Sports game.
Yes, I did.
Is that after you took a little hiatus from the gaming industry and then came back for that? I mean, what was it about that made you want to come back?
I actually got a plea call from Jessica Durchin, who was a friend of mine, Gain O'Hain. And Jessica needed somebody to go stop into the development house up out in San Francisco and figure out what the heck was going on and whether the product was actually getting done. And this is actually one of those cases where the engineer was doing all of the art processing, and I let them know. But I also got to know a lot about why Mattel wasn't really effective at getting their products out. Apparently, this product was hitting alpha, and they still didn't have a signed contract, which meant that the developer was getting no development money or support, just a lot of deadlines. And they also had no guarantee that they actually had a deal, which is the other thing that was pretty amazing to me, that anybody would actually develop under that premise. But what the developer did to limit their risk was they literally, after getting the art done, they only had one person on the project, who was the engineer who was leading all of the development for it, but he was actually doing all of the art processing too. And it was one of the reasons why alpha was getting later and later, because he was trying to process all of the art into the game instead of having a junior person anywhere doing that. But they had all of those junior people all off on paying products.
How do you feel about the concept of a Barbie sports game?
Actually, I thought it was a cool idea. They had snowboarding and all of these really great 3D rendered art Barbie characters, and they were actually really well done. I thought it was odd that there couldn't be like an intermixed game where you had both male and female players, you know, and I guess, you know, it would have had to been Barbie and Ken or whatever. But they decided to make girl-centric games at the time, and a lot of people did that by going to the extremes, which, you know, it's either, you know, it's Barbie and it's pink, or, you know, or it's G.I. Joe and it's green and, you know, and camo and there's shooting and death and blood and guts and gore, and there's like no happy medium, you know, in the games. And I was kind of surprised, and you still see that a lot actually, where there's like no middle ground, where things are not pink or blue.
Yeah, what color is halfway between pink and blue?
Something probably muddy and ugly. But you know what I mean. They have a hard time making things that appeal to both, and I think that that's silly. There's certainly lots of other things that you can do, or you can intersperse, you know, things that would appeal to both in a game.
Yeah, it seems to come back to what we were talking about with the Curse of the Azure Bonds and those. Well, you know, we have to cater to our audience, which is almost all male.
But your audience will only always all be male. And actually, nowadays, the computer game playing audience is actually largely female. So it's switched. It's changed quite a bit. It depends on which particular platform you're talking about, but there are a lot more female players nowadays.
So I thought we could end with this note. I really enjoyed your Confessions of a Game Developer or something like that.
Oh, Confessions of a Video Game Designer.
A video game designer piece. And, you know, at the end of that, you're talking about how video game designers are like chefs. You know, which that kind of caught my attention. I thought that was a really good, you know, metaphor. And a good chef obviously has to sample and taste, not just the dishes, but all the ingredients that go into it.
I
wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on this image.
Sure. I think of it as you have to get into the heart of the technology and make sure that you're doing the processes the best that they can be. You're using the best tools so that you can get things, envisioned the best. You have to be extremely creative with how you envision how a product will work. Many times games are not underneath what they seem to be on the surface. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors that go on. And so if you actually did what you could only act, if everything was real physics, it would be real boring. Just like in a role-playing game, we don't put in the bathroom and the kitchen, you know, because those are not the fun parts of playing the game. You don't want to think about that while you're playing a game. You want to go around and destroy monsters and have epic adventures and find treasure. Yay, save the princess. You know, you don't want to do the mundane things. And although they build mundane things in and they call it grinding, it's not the most fun part of the aspects of the game. You want that kind of that roller coaster ride. And so in order to do that, whoever is managing the product and helping to envision the product really needs to get into what can the technology do, what can be displayed, what is the most compelling thing that players want to think that they are actually doing. And, you know, you want that rush. And it has to come on a fairly regular basis because that's your reward. I just accomplished something amazing. And the something amazing can't be I pressed the A button, 40 times in a row. I mean, that's
just collected 12 bear asses.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be a little more elaborate than that. There is a mental game on top of the mental game, and it's not just a physical game. And it's true also for the way that we envision the games in themselves. You know, are we using the best technology to display what it is that we want to display? Will the player actually get that feeling of being there? Will they be, will it supersede all of the other stimulus in the room? And that's when you know you really have a game, because people are not paying attention to anything else going on. They're busy doing the game.
Well, that's an excellent way to end this, I think. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to? Anything you want to mention? I know you've done the espresso thing and the...
Espresso Fitness is actually a way to take people's minds off of exercising through sort of playing a game. It's more of a simulation than I would have wanted it to be. The espresso bike is in fitness clubs everywhere. And they are still out there, but they're not doing as well as we had hoped. It was supposed to make exercise fun, though. Instead of playing hamster wheel and watching little LED lights race up, depending on how much your heart rate was going up, or what incline you were going up on a stationary bike, it was supposed to be adventuring in real places and having the ability to play some minor games along the way, or even just race yourself in your last instance, or keep up with the pacer, or race the other virtual players. And it was supposed to allow, say, you and I to both get on a stationary bike in two different places in the world and go have a ride together and be able to talk to each other.
That sounds cool to me.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know what? The biggest motivation for exercise is actually to go to the gym with a friend. And so, because you gotta show up, your friend's going to be there, right? And the other thing that makes it fun is when you're not thinking about the exercise, but you're instead having some sort of an adventure. It's just like with the games, you get into a Zen mode. So that was what Espresso was supposed to be. Was making
it going to drive my spell checker insane.
Yeah. I didn't name the company.
And that's all for this week's episode. Hope I see you guys next week. We do have the first week of classes starting tomorrow, though, so I'm gonna have to be sort of iffy about whether there'll be an episode. Just kind of depends on how that first week goes and if I get too swamped. But hopefully I'll have time to put out a new retrospective. And as always, appreciate your suggestions as for games you'd like to see me review on the show. And as always, I want to thank you very, very much from the absolute rock bottom of my heart for your support. Continued support of Matt Chat really means a lot to me, guys. If you'd like to support the show, just go to the Patreon site in the show notes. It takes about 30 seconds to set that up. Any amount, whatever you think the show is worth. Really appreciate it. Plus, that'll give you some access to some special podcasts, Google Hangouts, and a bunch of other really cool stuff. And by the way, I don't know if you've... I've mentioned this before, but we do have transcripts now available for these interview episodes. I just go to the Patreon site and you can download those, and you don't even have to be a supporter to get the transcripts. So thank everyone for that continued support. All right, let's see. What about the news from the Matt Cave? Quite a few items here. One is pretty interesting. Beamdog is working on a new Baldur's Gate game, apparently the Mysterious Adventure Y. And this game will be set in between Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So there's definitely a lot of room in there for some good stories. Really, it's a great idea, I think. And just in case you haven't heard of Beamdog, they've been doing the enhanced editions of these games. And they're actually, they were founded by two BioWare guys. I think a programmer, I think the other guy might have been a producer. I didn't write that down. But anyway, they had some experience with BioWare games besides these enhanced editions. So stay tuned for that. Should be pretty good. And then Thamer, a longtime supporter of the show, sent in some news about a game, upcoming Kickstarter project called Children of Morta. This is a narrative-based roguelike developed by Dead Mage. Looks like it's going to be very story narrative-driven, kind of unusual for a roguelike game. That Kickstarter is going up on the 20th, so I'll try to mention that again when that comes out. And then finally, just a cool thing that arrived this week, From Bedrooms to Billions. This is a new DVD. Haven't even had time to watch this. Haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet. But this is apparently sort of like the gameplay of the movie that we did, sort of thing, but it's about the UK and that side of things. So it's got the BBC Micro, ZX Spectrum, the Amiga Atari ST. They got interviews in here by Mark Healy, Ian Livingston, Peter Molyneux, Jeff Minter, David Braben, David Perry, Mark Cerny. So a lot of big names. Really looking forward to watching this, but I haven't had time to yet, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. Actually, it supported their Kickstarter, so I think this is how I got this. Hopefully you guys supported it too. If not, I'm sure you can find some way to order it. All right, what about that ale of the week? This week, maybe this will be good. I got this in a variety pack. I'm not usually a big fan of the Pilsners, but I thought, you know, what the heck, I thought I'd give this a try since I've got it. This is Summit Brewing Company, and they call this a Bohemian style. And I mean, Summit usually makes a pretty good beer. They're based in St. Paul, so just right down the road, about an hour away. Unfortunately, they don't really put anything about this on here anywhere, like alcohol content. I would assume since it's a Pilsner, it's probably 4.5 or maybe even a 4%. Usually not very strong. But anyway, let's get this open and see what it's all about. All right, so I got some of this Summit Pilsner Bohemian style here in this rather excellent drinking horn. It smells nice. Got sort of a honey-like smell, a little bit of that sort of cornflakes like aroma that you get with these Pilsners. Definitely smell the sort of malty aromas in this, but it doesn't smell bad. I'll go ahead and give it a try. Yeah, definitely. I just don't know why folks like these Pilsners. It just always tastes like a really soggy cornflakes to me. Not a whole lot of other flavors here. Never been my favorite style. It's very watery. Just not a lot of flavor other than that sort of cornflake like thing. I guess maybe that's fine for Pilsners fans though. So I don't want to knock it too hard, but it's just not my favorite style. But this would be good, I guess, if you're out on a hot summer day, you don't want to get drunk, you don't want to have a heat stroke or something by getting dehydrated. Maybe these more watery beers like this would be a good thing. Just not really something I'm interested in. So I'm going to go 1 out of 5 drinking horns on this. It is a Pilsner, so I kind of knew I wasn't going to like this, but you know how it is. You get those variety packs, and you don't want to just waste alcohol. I mean, it's alcohol abuse. So, all right, let's wrap this up with a quotation. And I was looking for quotations about exercise after hearing about Susan's espresso fitness machines, and I found one from my grandpa's favorite comedian, Red Skelton. I wasn't expecting to see that, but it's really funny. Little fun quotation here. It goes something like this. I get plenty of exercise carrying the coffins of my friends who exercise. See you guys next week.
Nick, give him your wallet.
What for?
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.